Ava had always been the one people turned to at work. Whether it was helping with a complicated project or offering advice on a tough client, she was known for her reliability and her ability to get things done without drama. Her coworkers appreciated her quiet competence, and her boss had even mentioned in passing that a promotion might be in the cards for her if she kept up the good work. Ava wasn't one to boast about her achievements, but she had been working toward this for years. She had earned her place. But little did she know, someone else was scheming to take it all from her. Sarah, a colleague who had joined the company a year after Ava, had always seemed friendly at first. She was eager, enthusiastic, and to be honest, a little too eager to befriend Ava. They'd had lunch together a few times, and Sarah would often compliment Ava on how organized and sharp she was. Ava never suspected that Sarah might be hiding a more competitive side. It wasn't until the promotion discussion started picking up that Ava began to notice a shift. Sarah had suddenly started acting differently, more attentive in meetings, frequently asking questions that seemed designed to make her look knowledgeable. Ava felt something was off, but she brushed it off. After all, Sarah had every right to show interest in moving up, just like she did. It was during a routine team meeting that Ava first heard the rumors. She had walked in a little late after dealing with a client on the phone. But when she sat down, she noticed everyone was unusually quiet. Sarah was talking, her voice a little louder than usual, explaining how she'd been handling projects that Ava was responsible for. Sarah mentioned a few things, nothing specific, just vague suggestions that she was taking over some of Ava's tasks. It was almost as if Sarah was positioning herself as the go-to person for everything Ava had always handled. Ava was taken aback. She had been the one leading these projects, not Sarah. But no one questioned Sarah's words. They seemed to fall into place perfectly, and Ava could feel the tension in the room. Something wasn't right. After the meeting, Ava went back to her desk, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. But it wasn't long before she got a message from her boss. He wanted to meet her. Nervously, Ava walked into his office, where he mentioned Sarah's name several times in connection with the upcoming promotion. Ava was confused. Sarah had been in the company for a shorter time than she had, and her performance hadn't been anything spectacular. Yet her boss seemed impressed by Sarah's recent contributions. The mention of Ava's name was barely a whisper, a passing reference. It hit Ava hard. Had Sarah really been undermining her? She had to find out more. The next few days were a blur. Ava started paying close attention to Sarah's every move. She noticed that Sarah had begun talking about ideas for projects that Ava had spearheaded. Sarah was acting as though she'd been a part of every decision, even though Ava had been the one doing the work. Ava tried not to let it bother her, but it did. It was a quiet game of manipulation, and Ava realized that Sarah had been lying to make herself look better in front of management. The more Ava thought about it, the more she saw the pattern. Sarah had been trying to take credit for things Ava had done, and now it seemed like the entire team was buying into it. But Ava wasn't the type to give up without a fight. She decided to quietly gather evidence. Over the next few weeks, she started saving emails, keeping track of her meetings, and documenting everything. She made sure that every accomplishment, every decision she made was written down. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting her hard-earned reputation. She even made note of all the positive feedback she had received from clients and coworkers, all of it painting a clear picture of who had truly been the driving force behind the team's success. Ava knew the importance of being prepared. She wouldn't let Sarah take everything from her without a fight. The breakthrough came when Ava stumbled upon a file in the shared drive that Sarah had inadvertently left open on her computer. It was a draft report that Sarah had written for their boss. It was full of lies, exaggerations, and omissions. Basically, an attempt to take full credit for Ava's work. The report even included details that were completely false. making it seem as though Sarah had single-handedly managed several of the projects Ava had led. Ava was furious but determined. She took screenshots, made copies of the files, and created a folder of all the evidence she'd gathered. It wasn't just the report. It was everything. The email chains, the meeting notes, the feedback from clients. All of it supported her version of events. She had everything she needed to prove the truth.
Ava walked into her boss's office the next morning, folder in hand. She didn't say a word at first, just placed the folder on his desk. When he looked up, she calmly explained what had been going on. She walked him through each piece of evidence, showing how Sarah had been taking credit for her work and even lying about it to gain favor. She didn't need to raise her voice. The facts spoke for themselves. Ava felt a calmness she hadn't expected. She wasn't angry. She was just ready for the truth to be heard. She didn't need to destroy Sarah's career, but she was determined to protect her own. And that's exactly what she did. When the truth came to light, Sarah's attempts to manipulate the situation crumbled. She couldn't deny the evidence Ava had gathered. The promotion that had once seemed so certain for Sarah was now in question. Ava's integrity and calm approach in the face of betrayal won her the respect of her boss and coworkers. Sarah, on the other hand, was left trying to explain herself, but her words fell flat. The reality of the situation had caught up with her, and she could no longer twist the truth to fit her narrative. In the end, Ava didn't just hold on to her position. She earned the respect she deserved. Though Sarah's lies were exposed, Ava wasn't interested in gloating. She didn't need to. Her professionalism and hard work had already proven what was true. She knew that the best revenge wasn't about bringing someone down. It was about standing firm in your own worth. And that's exactly what Ava did. She kept doing her job with the same dedication, knowing that no one could take that away from her. The promotion that had seemed so far out of reach? It eventually came, not because of Sarah's downfall, but because Ava had shown, through evidence and action, that she was the one truly deserving of it. The days following Ava's meeting with her boss were filled with a strange sense of relief. There was still a bit of nervous energy in her chest, but it was different now. She knew she had done the right thing. Yet, despite her calm, the ripple effect of what had happened soon began to spread through the office. Whispers started circulating about Sarah's questionable behavior, and a few colleagues who had been silently observing things began to approach Ava. They had seen it too, but none of them had the courage to speak up. Some had even offered support when they found out Ava had confronted the situation head-on. Ava wasn't one to bask in the attention. She preferred to keep her head down and focus on her work, as always, but it felt different now. Her reputation had shifted from just the competent, quiet worker to someone who could stand up for herself and others. It wasn't something Ava had ever wanted to prove to anyone, but she understood that sometimes you had to make your intentions clear, especially when others were trying to undermine you. Her strength wasn't just in the work she did, but in how she handled adversity. Soon after, there was a company-wide meeting scheduled. Ava knew it was an important one. Management would be discussing future leadership roles, and the promotion was on the agenda. She couldn't ignore the subtle hints that Sarah had been expecting it to be hers. Ava had overheard a few things. Sarah's excitement about the promotion, the way she'd been positioning herself to be in the spotlight, and even a comment about how, this time it was finally her turn. Ava didn't let it bother her. Instead, she focused on preparing for the meeting, making sure her contributions were clearly articulated. When the meeting began, it was clear that the atmosphere had shifted. There was an underlying tension in the air, as though everyone knew something had changed, but no one was quite ready to address it. Ava's boss, however, seemed more direct than usual. He started by thanking everyone for their hard work and emphasizing the importance of transparency in decision-making. Then, he glanced at Ava and nodded. "Ava, we've been impressed with your work, especially over the past few months. Your dedication and thoroughness haven't gone unnoticed." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting such praise, especially not in front of the entire team. But as her boss continued, it became clear that her reputation was shifting. She had done the work, and it was being acknowledged. She wasn't the only one in the room who knew it either. Several colleagues nodded in agreement as her boss spoke about her contributions, and it was almost like they were silently cheering her on. But Ava's attention was also caught by Sarah's reaction. While the others clapped and murmured their congratulations, Sarah sat still, her face a mask of forced composure. Ava couldn't help but notice the tightness in Sarah's jaw and the way her hands fidgeted with the edge of her notepad. It was clear that Sarah wasn't as confident now that the promotion was no longer a certainty. Ava couldn't deny a small sense of satisfaction at seeing Sarah's plans unravel, but she quickly pushed the thought away. This wasn't about making Sarah suffer. It was about her own hard work being recognized. She knew what she deserved, and now everyone else did too. After the meeting, Sarah cornered Ava by the coffee machine. There was an awkward silence between them before Sarah forced a smile. "Looks like you've got this whole thing wrapped up, huh?" she said, her voice too sweet to be genuine. Ava looked at Sarah, but instead of responding with the sarcasm she could have, she simply nodded. "I've always believed that actions speak louder than words. I'm just focused on doing my job." Sarah's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Well, good luck with that," she said, and walked away. Ava didn't let the encounter bother her. She knew Sarah wasn't going to make it easy, but that was just the nature of office politics. What mattered was that Ava had stayed true to herself, kept her integrity intact, and, most importantly, protected her future. She didn't need to worry about Sarah anymore. Her focus was on what was next, on how she could continue to prove her worth and advance without the need for manipulation or deceit. She was done playing games. In the coming weeks, Ava continued to work hard, staying focused on her goals. The promotion decision still loomed over her, but she wasn't anxious. The meeting had given her more confidence, and she could tell that others in the office were beginning to recognize her quiet strength and leadership. Ava's days were filled with a sense of purpose as she juggled multiple projects, ensuring that her work always spoke for itself. She was no longer concerned about the behind-the-scenes drama or the office gossip. She knew that the most powerful thing she could do now was to keep working hard and stay true to herself. That was her best defense, and it was already winning. But while Ava was growing more confident in her position, Sarah wasn't giving up. She was still making moves, still trying to position herself for the promotion, and still subtly undermining Ava in the process. Ava didn't let it shake her, but she knew that this wasn't going to be over soon. She just had to stay focused and keep proving herself. The days following Ava's meeting with her boss were filled with a strange sense of relief. There was still a bit of nervous energy in her chest, but it was different now. She knew she had done the right thing. Yet, despite her calm, the ripple effect of what had happened soon began to spread through the office. Whispers started circulating about Sarah's questionable behavior, and a few colleagues who had been silently observing things began to approach Ava. They had seen it too, but none of them had the courage to speak up. Some had even offered support when they found out Ava had confronted the situation head-on. Ava wasn't one to bask in the attention. She preferred to keep her head down and focus on her work, as always. But it felt different now. Her reputation had shifted from just the competent, quiet worker to someone who could stand up for herself and others. It wasn't something Ava had ever wanted to prove to anyone, but she understood that sometimes you had to make your intentions clear, especially when others were trying to undermine you. Her strength wasn't just in the work she did, but in how she handled adversity. Soon after, there was a company-wide meeting scheduled. Ava knew it was an important one. Management would be discussing future leadership roles, and the promotion was on the agenda. She couldn't ignore the subtle hints that Sarah had been expecting it to be hers. Ava had overheard a few things. Sarah's excitement about the promotion, the way she'd been positioning herself to be in the spotlight, and even a comment about how, this time it was finally her turn. Ava didn't let it bother her. Instead, she focused on preparing for the meeting, making sure her contributions were clearly articulated. One afternoon, as Ava was finishing up a project in her office, she received an unexpected email. It was from HR. The subject line read, Follow up on recent report concerns. Ava's heart skipped a beat. Had Sarah escalated things further? She opened the email with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The message was short and to the point. We'd like to schedule a meeting with you regarding the recent concerns raised about your performance. Please come by our office at your earliest convenience. Ava knew the meeting wasn't going to be a friendly chat. She had already proved herself to her boss, but it seemed Sarah wasn't giving up just yet. Ava took a deep breath, gathered her thoughts, and made her way to HR. When she arrived, the room was slightly intimidating, too professional, too sterile. Her boss was already sitting there along with the HR manager. Ava sat down, trying to keep her nerves in check. The HR manager spoke first, his tone neutral but firm. Ava, we've received additional feedback regarding your recent client project, and we need to clarify a few things. Ava's mind instantly went on alert. She knew the feedback was likely coming from Sarah. There was no one else who had raised any concerns. Ava nodded, listening carefully as the HR manager continued. There have been mentions of you not meeting expectations in terms of communication with the team and project deadlines. Ava felt a surge of frustration, but remained calm. She knew exactly what had happened. Sarah had taken her own mistakes, twisted them, and used them to make Ava look like the one who couldn't keep up. But Ava didn't react. She simply pulled out a copy of the timeline and communication logs from the project. I've kept track of every email, every meeting, and every deadline, all of which were met and communicated clearly. If there's been any issue, I'm more than happy to review it. The HR manager glanced at her boss, who was now studying the documents Ava had placed on the table. He said nothing at first, but Ava could feel his eyes on her, as if he were weighing the situation carefully. After a moment, her boss spoke. Ava, I've reviewed your performance, and from what I can see, there's no significant issue. The concerns raised about communication seem to be misinterpreted. He paused, his eyes now turning toward the HR manager. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to discuss this matter with Sarah. She seems to have a different perspective on things. Ava's heart sank, but she wasn't surprised. She had expected this. The manipulation was happening right in front of her, but it wasn't going to work this time. I agree, Ava said firmly, maintaining her composure. However, I've been keeping records of all my communications with Sarah, as well as other team members. If there's any confusion, I'm more than willing to clear it up. Her boss gave her a sharp nod. We'll need to look into this further. Please bear with us. The HR manager, though still maintaining a professional demeanor, now seemed more uncomfortable. Understood, he said quietly, clearly not expecting Ava to be so composed in the face of Sarah's accusations. Ava left the meeting feeling more confident than ever. It wasn't the kind of victory she was hoping for, but it was a step in the right direction. She knew now that Sarah had reached her breaking point. She was desperate, and that made her dangerous. But Ava wasn't just going to sit back and let it happen again. She was ready. Over the next week, Ava kept a low profile, continuing to work hard without drawing attention. She avoided Sarah as much as possible, letting her do her own thing while Ava focused on proving her worth. Every email, every conversation, every decision was carefully documented. Ava even began to meet with a few trusted colleagues, gathering their feedback and insight into how Sarah had been behaving in meetings. If Sarah was going to keep trying to manipulate the situation, Ava was going to be ready with more than just words. She had everything she needed. Then, one morning, Ava received another email from HR. This one was different. The subject line read, "Follow-up, Team Performance Review." Ava opened it with a mix of curiosity and caution. It was a scheduled meeting, but this time it was only with her boss and HR. She had a feeling this was going to be the turning point. Sarah had pushed too far, and now it was her turn to face the consequences. As Ava made her way to the meeting, she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was taking control of her future. And this time, Sarah's lies wouldn't have a chance to take her down. The air in the meeting room was heavy with anticipation as Ava sat down in front of her boss and the HR manager. She was no longer the nervous, uncertain employee she had been weeks ago. The last few days of gathering evidence and staying composed had only strengthened her resolve. She knew this meeting wasn't just about defending herself. It was about ensuring that her integrity, hard work, and reputation were firmly established. She was ready for whatever came next. Her boss started the meeting with a calm but firm tone. "Ava, thank you for meeting with us. We've had a chance to review the information you've provided, including the communications and timelines. It seems there's been some misunderstanding." He paused, and Ava could feel the weight of the moment. "We've also had further discussions with Sarah regarding the issues she raised." Ava kept her expression neutral, but inside, she was tense. She knew that this was the moment that would decide everything. Her boss continued, "After reviewing all the evidence, we found that your performance, communication, and work ethic were, in fact, up to standard. The issues Sarah raised regarding project deadlines and communication were not substantiated by the facts." He turned his gaze to the HR manager, who nodded in agreement. It seems Sarah's concerns were based on personal interpretations, and, unfortunately, some misleading statements. Ava didn't let herself feel a sense of triumph, but she couldn't ignore the relief that washed over her. The truth had come to light, and the facts were on her side. Her boss was looking at her now, his tone softening. "Ava, I want to apologize for the confusion. Your dedication and professionalism haven't gone unnoticed. You've been a valued member of the team, and will ensure that your contributions are properly recognized." The words were exactly what Ava needed to hear. She had worked tirelessly for this recognition, and now it was finally being given to her. But there was still a quiet part of her that couldn't help but wonder how far Sarah had gone to manipulate the situation. She knew Sarah was ambitious, but this had crossed a line. Ava decided it was time to address the situation head-on. "Thank you for the clarification," Ava said calmly, her voice steady but firm. "However, I think it's important that we address the root of this issue. It's one thing for someone to have concerns, but when those concerns turn into false accusations and attempts to discredit others, it's not only unprofessional, it's damaging to the entire team. I would appreciate it if we could have a clear understanding moving forward about what behavior is acceptable and how these types of issues will be handled in the future." Her boss and the HR manager exchanged looks. The HR manager shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the serious implications of what Ava had just said. Ava wasn't trying to make Sarah an enemy. She was merely calling out the manipulation for what it was. She wasn't going to be intimidated by anyone anymore, especially not by someone who had tried to take her down. Her boss nodded slowly, acknowledging Ava's point. "I completely agree. We don't tolerate any form of dishonesty or manipulation. We will address this matter internally and make sure that the team is aware of the importance of maintaining professionalism at all times." He paused before adding, "Sarah will be given the opportunity to address this with you and will ensure that any future concerns are raised in a more constructive manner." Ava took a deep breath, the weight of the situation finally starting to ease off her shoulders. The meeting wasn't over, but she had made her point clear. She wasn't just defending herself. She was taking a stand for what was right, for honesty and accountability, and it felt empowering. After the meeting, her boss followed up with a few more details about upcoming changes in the team structure, but Ava's mind was already racing ahead. She was no longer worried about Sarah's petty schemes or manipulation. What mattered now was that she had proven herself, not just to her boss, but to the entire team. Her reputation as someone who could be trusted and relied upon was cemented. That evening, as Ava sat at her desk reviewing her next project, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. The battle wasn't over, but it had shifted. Ava was no longer the underdog. She was the one in control. Sarah, on the other hand, had exposed herself. Ava knew it wouldn't be long before the cracks in Sarah's facade began to show. People would begin to see the manipulative tactics for what they were. Ava wasn't about to gloat, though. She didn't need to. She had already won in the only way that mattered, by staying true to herself and focusing on the work that really counted. There was no need for petty revenge. Instead, Ava was building something stronger, a reputation of integrity and quiet strength. She knew that would carry her far, much farther than any quick promotion or superficial win. As the days passed, the office dynamics slowly began to shift. Sarah, though still present, seemed to retreat further into the background. Her interactions with the team became more strained, her manipulations no longer as effective. It was clear to everyone that Ava had not only survived the storm, but emerged even stronger. She didn't need anyone's approval or validation. She had already proven her worth. And as Ava continued to excel, she realized that sometimes the best way to deal with office politics wasn't by fighting fire with fire. It was about staying grounded, focused on your goals, and letting your work speak for itself. The promotion she had been fighting for wasn't just an acknowledgement of her hard work. It was the natural result of her integrity, and now it felt like it was within reach. The future was looking brighter, and Ava was ready to take the next step, whatever it might be. The weeks that followed were a turning point for Ava. She was no longer just working to prove herself to others. She was working because she genuinely loved her job and the sense of accomplishment it brought. Every project she took on seemed to flow with ease, and her productivity soared. She had gained the respect of her colleagues, and even those who had once kept their distance started coming to her for advice. There was a quiet strength about her now, an aura of confidence that had come from not just surviving a difficult situation, but from learning and growing from it. Despite Sarah's attempts to manipulate the situation, her plan had unraveled completely. The cracks in Sarah's facade were becoming too visible for anyone to ignore. Her once charming demeanor had turned into something more brittle, her every word now laced with thinly veiled resentment. People started noticing how her actions didn't align with her words. While Ava's reputation had been solidified, Sarah's credibility was slowly slipping away, and Ava couldn't help but notice it in the way people started avoiding her. Conversations at lunch would quiet down when Sarah entered the room, and her attempts to participate in discussions at meetings now felt forced, almost desperate. Ava never rubbed it in, but she couldn't ignore the way things had shifted. Sarah's own actions were catching up with her. One afternoon, Ava received another email from HR, but this time it wasn't just about any internal issues. It was an invitation for a performance review meeting with her boss. Ava felt a little twinge of nervousness, but she quickly brushed it aside. She had worked hard, and now was the time to have her efforts recognized. She walked into the meeting room with her usual calm composure, but when she sat down across from her boss, she noticed something different in his expression. It wasn't just the usual polite smile. There was a sense of approval, an acknowledgement in his eyes that told Ava she was finally being seen for everything she had put in. "Ava," her boss began, "we've been reviewing the team's progress, and I have to say, your work has exceeded all expectations. You've consistently proven yourself to be a leader in this team, and we've been considering you for a new role. Your professionalism, attention to detail, and the way you handled everything over the last few weeks have not gone unnoticed." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting some recognition, but this was more than she had imagined. Her boss continued, "We'd like to offer you the promotion we had discussed a few months ago. It's yours, if you're ready." Ava was taken aback for a moment, but the surprise quickly turned into a deep sense of pride. She had earned this, not just because of her work, but because of how she had handled herself when everything had gone wrong. The battles, the frustration, the manipulation, it had all led to this. The promotion wasn't just about title or salary. It was a validation of her character, her integrity, and her ability to stand firm in the face of adversity. She took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in before she spoke. "Thank you. I'm honored. I've worked hard to get here, and I'm ready to take on the new responsibilities." Ava wasn't just talking about the promotion. She was talking about the lessons she had learned, the growth she had gone through, and the person she had become. Her boss smiled. "We're confident you'll excel in this role. You've proven you're more than capable." Ava left that meeting feeling a sense of closure she hadn't even realized she was looking for. The promotion was just the icing on the cake. It was the final acknowledgement that everything she had done, everything she had built, had been worth it. She didn't feel the need to gloat, nor did she need to be vindictive. Her success wasn't tied to someone else's failure. It was hers and hers alone. As she walked back to her desk, Ava couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since the day she had first confronted Sarah. What had once felt like an impossible struggle was now a story of triumph. She hadn't just been fighting for a promotion, she had been fighting for her self-respect, for the ability to stand up for herself when no one else would. She had fought to keep her integrity intact, and in doing so, had built something even more valuable than any title, a legacy of quiet strength and resilience. That evening, as Ava sat in her favorite coffee shop, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was also full of promise. She had already proven what she was capable of, and now it was time to move forward. She wasn't just ready for the new role, she was ready to shape her own future. Whatever came next, she knew she had everything she needed to succeed. The next chapter of Ava's journey was beginning, and this time, it was all on her terms. As the days passed after her promotion, Ava found herself in a strange new world. What had once been a comfortable routine of hard work and proving herself had now transformed into an even greater challenge. The role came with new responsibilities, new projects, and the need to manage a team. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Ava felt empowered. She had earned this, and now she had the chance to shape her career in ways she had always imagined. Her colleagues, who had once viewed her as just another team member, now looked to her for guidance. It was a humbling experience to suddenly find herself in a leadership role, but Ava quickly adapted. She remained the calm, focused presence she had always been, but now she used her newfound authority to inspire and mentor her team. She never took credit for their work. Instead, she made sure to highlight their successes and encourage them to grow. Ava believed in lifting others up rather than bringing them down, a value she had learned through her own experiences. But with success came challenges. There were still moments when Sarah's presence loomed large in the background. Though Sarah had been quiet after her failure, Ava knew that she hadn't completely backed down. The quiet jealousy in the office was palpable at times, and Ava couldn't help but notice the occasional sideways glance or the barely hidden sighs from Sarah's direction. Ava wasn't concerned, though. She had already learned that the most powerful thing she could do was keep focusing on her work and her team. The drama and petty rivalries of the office no longer had a hold on her. However, one day, as Ava was finalizing a report for an important client, she received a message that caught her off guard. It was from Sarah. The message was simple, but its intent was clear. "Can we talk?" Ava's first instinct was to ignore it. She had no reason to engage with Sarah anymore. But then, a strange sense of curiosity and maturity took over. Sarah had always been a source of tension in her life, but Ava wasn't interested in conflict. If Sarah wanted to talk, maybe it was time to end things on her own terms. Ava sent a quick reply, agreeing to meet after work. When the time came, Ava met Sarah at a nearby cafe. Sarah was sitting at a table looking nervous. She didn't seem like the confident, calculating person she had once been. Instead, she looked small, almost fragile, in the dim light of the cafe. Ava took a seat across from her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence hung heavy between them. Finally, Sarah broke the quiet. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice lacking the usual bravado, "for everything that happened. I got carried away, and I made a lot of mistakes. I let my jealousy get the best of me." She paused, as if unsure of how to continue. "I never meant for things to go as far as they did. I wanted the promotion so badly." Ava was surprised. She hadn't expected this. She had imagined Sarah's apology would be more of a deflection or an attempt to explain her actions away. But this was different. Sarah seemed genuinely remorseful, and Ava could see that her actions had caught up with her. She wasn't the same confident coworker who had once tried to undermine Ava. She was a person who had made mistakes, who had let her own insecurities push her to hurt someone else. Ava took a deep breath, her calm demeanor never wavering. She could have easily turned the tables, called Sarah out, or made her feel guilty for everything she had done. But instead, Ava chose something else, something more powerful. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that you recognize them and learn from them." Sarah looked at her, her eyes wide with surprise. "You're not angry?" Ava shook her head. "I'm not angry anymore. What happened, happened, but I'm not interested in holding on to that. I've moved on." She paused before adding, "I hope you can too." There was a long silence again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like closure, like a weight being lifted from both of them. Sarah's eyes softened, and for the first time, Ava saw her as just another person, not a threat or an adversary, but a colleague who had made a poor choice. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, standing up from the table. "I hope you do well." "I really do." Ava nodded. "I appreciate that, and I hope you find your way too." As Sarah walked out of the cafe, Ava sat back in her chair, reflecting on the conversation. It had been civil, honest, and surprisingly freeing. Ava realized that in that moment, she had let go of any lingering resentment. She didn't need to carry that anger or frustration with her anymore. It was over. The next day at work, the office felt different. There was no lingering tension, no unspoken rivalry. It was as if a chapter of her life had closed, and she could now focus entirely on what mattered: her work, her team, and her future. Ava had learned so many valuable lessons over the past few months, and one of the most important ones was that forgiveness, whether for others or for herself, was the key to moving forward. Now, as she moved into her new role, Ava felt more confident than ever. She wasn't just going to be a leader because of the title on her desk. She was going to lead because she had earned it, through hard work, through patience, and through the ability to rise above petty conflicts and focus on the bigger picture. The road ahead was still long, but Ava knew she was ready for whatever came next. The future was hers for the taking, and nothing was going to hold her back. As the months went by, Ava continued to thrive in her new role. The promotion had given her the opportunity to shape the team, and she did so with a thoughtful, strategic approach that not only improved efficiency, but also fostered an environment of trust and collaboration. The once quiet, reserved team was now an energized group, working together seamlessly. Ava was not just a manager, she was a mentor, a guide, and a leader who was genuinely invested in the success of those around her. Her relationship with her colleagues had evolved. No longer the underdog, Ava was seen as someone who could be relied upon, not just for her expertise, but for her integrity and strength. She made sure to always recognize the contributions of her team, often celebrating their successes with simple but meaningful gestures. She wanted them to know that their hard work was noticed, that they were valued beyond just their roles in the company. Ava was determined to create a workplace where everyone felt they had a voice, where they weren't just cogs in a machine, but important players in a bigger vision. One day, during a team meeting, her boss stopped by to give some feedback. He was impressed with how well the team had been performing under Ava's leadership. "You've made a real difference here, Ava," he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. "Your leadership has transformed this team. I've been hearing nothing but positive things about your work." Ava smiled, feeling a sense of pride. It wasn't the praise she sought. It was the knowledge that she had created something meaningful, that she had turned a challenge into an opportunity to grow not just herself, but those around her. Her team had exceeded all expectations, and Ava had been the steady hand guiding them through it all. She was proud, not because of the title she held, but because of the respect and admiration she had earned through consistent effort and integrity. But even more than the success at work, Ava realized that her personal growth had been the true reward. The journey she had taken, starting with the betrayal, the tension, and the struggle for recognition, had transformed her in ways she had never expected. She was no longer defined by her past or by the actions of others. Ava had found her own voice and had learned to trust in her abilities. She had faced challenges head-on and had come out the other side not just stronger, but wiser. Her relationship with Sarah had faded into the background, a distant memory of a time when she had been tested. Ava had forgiven Sarah, but more importantly, she had forgiven herself. She had let go of the bitterness, the frustration, and the anger, choosing instead to focus on her own growth. She no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. The quiet, resilient strength that had carried her through the toughest moments of her career was now her greatest asset. One evening, after work, Ava walked through the city streets, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. It wasn't just about the promotion or the success she had achieved. It was about the person she had become, the confident, capable woman who had faced adversity and had chosen to rise above it. She realized that the best revenge wasn't about getting even, but about becoming someone who didn't need to engage in petty games, someone who could rise above the drama and focus on what truly mattered. Ava had taken control of her own story, and as she looked ahead, she knew that this was only the beginning. The future was wide open, full of possibilities she hadn't yet imagined. But whatever it brought, she was ready. With her strength, her integrity, and her unwavering belief in herself, Ava knew she would continue to succeed, not just in her career, but in every aspect of her life. She wasn't just surviving anymore. Ava was thriving, and the best part was she knew it was all hers to keep.